and welcome to another episode of You Haven't Seen What? A couple's quest to rectify the wrongs of their partner never seeing culturally relevant movies. I'm Joelle.
And I'm Parry.
And we're here discussing a random movie today.
Well, first of all,
it's all pretty random.
You didn't remind people that we're married.
I think at this point, if we're still doing the podcast, that's always the indicator, right? If we're still doing it, we're still married.
Well, I figured after your annoyance with me last week that, we had to remind people or reassure people that we were still married after UHF.
I think that really annoyed you more than it annoyed me, quite honestly. That's sort of what I'm taking from it. I had a lot of... I don't want to say pity because that sounds like the wrong word, but I definitely had some feelings of deep sympathy because I really didn't empathize in you feeling sad that you were sad about a movie that you love so much as a adult. But so,
well, I have to thank you for carrying me through much of that episode because I really froze. I really melted down, and you can hear it in listening to the episode that I am just coming apart, and I do not know what to do. And so,
you think you were coming apart. I don't think you sounded like you were coming apart.
Well, I was trying to find a way to like it more than I did, and I had to think about it. You said some things in there that got me thinking about how much we all want to create something that we love, and we want to infuse it with feelings that inspire us, and often that means that we're borrowing from other things that have influenced us, other artists, other films and songs. And I know he's heavily influenced by the Zucker brothers and SCTV. And it's funny, actually, Robert K. Weiss, who plays the bartender in the film, he actually was one of Weird Al's music video producers, but he also produced a lot for the Zucker brothers, like Kentucky Fried Movie and Police Squad. So I think that's why he's in there. But, you just have to realize that not everything is in your lane. And in this case, he had drifted out of his lane a bit here. But, not to be a UHF apologist, but I did find...
Although you are.
I did find a way to really enjoy it, and that was to watch it with the commentary. Because it has lots of great... Who
is the commentary with?
It's with Weird Al and the director of the film, Levy.
Right, his long-term manager.
Yeah.
Long-time manager.
Since like 1980 or 81. So they are actually making fun of the film a bit and then giving all kinds of fun trivia like, oh, look, there's Weird Al's moles that disappear partway through the film because he had them removed. And just fun little silly things. But they make a lot of...
I don't know if I give a shit about his moles. Just saying. And moles makes me think of Electric Dreams, which makes me think of a different film that you made me watch.
Now you're just going down a dark hole of frustration. So
that's pretty much every time you pick the movie is a dark hole of frustration.
Oh, ouch.
Blade Runner. Just kidding. Oh. Well, I'm just frustrated with Harrison's Ford kissing abilities and lack of.
I know, we want them to be so much better.
I know we do, but he's not.
Maybe you'll just have to, awful. Next time, if we ever meet him, you can just kiss him and find out.
No, I would never want to. That's just the point. It's been ruined now. But anyway, so Weird Al's moles, that's where we were. Yeah,
so we decided to, watch another simple comedy, basic comedy from the 80s. And this one was Club Paradise, not to be confused with the 1945 Club Paradise, as I'm sure many of you were thinking of.
No, I'm sure that they weren't. I'm sure that they weren't even thinking of this Club Paradise, to be quite honest.
This summer, make your escape to Club Paradise. Join your host, Robin Williams, with Peter O'Toole, Rick Moranis, Jimmy Cliff, Twiggy, Adolph Caesar, Eugene Levy, and Joanna Cassidy. Club Paradise, where civilization ends and excitement begins. It's the vacation you'll never forget, no matter how hard you try.
Club Paradise. I don't know too many people who have seen this movie, although I do remember feeling like it's another one of those, didn't do well at the box office, so let's load it on cable. Mm-hmm. So I think there were a lot of cable sightings in the mid to late 80s. of this movie.
Sightings.
And watching, because I recommended this movie. I'm not sure. I do know why, but I recommended this movie and I watched it as a kid and I loved it. I thought it was funny as heck. So I don't know what that says to my sense of humor entirely, but I think it's just a super silly comedy that takes place in my birthplace, Jamaica. So that's good enough for me.
Even though they call it's not ever mentioned that it's Jamaica. They call it
Saint
something
Nicholas.
else. Yeah.
No, it's Saint Nicholas, but it's really Jamaica.
It's supposed to be one of those islands that
British.
was formerly under British direct rule and is now connected in some way. Still has British connection,
Right.
but has its own self-rule. And it's meant to be a generic Caribbean island, but it's obviously Jamaica.
I mean, I don't know about obviously, but it is Jamaica.
Okay, obviously.
It's obviously to you because you've been there.
And because I'm married to you and your family.
Correct.
And how
Correct.
could I not recognize it?
I mean, that's a good point. But I know, very good, Whitey. Good job.
Well, we'll talk about Whitey as we go throughout the discussion
There's
of this
a lot,
this
including
film,
actual characters named Whitey or White, which is very interesting altogether. Interesting choice. So yeah, what did you think about, wait, should I ask you that or should we actually do a synopsis?
Well, I can do a quick sum up of what I thought if you
No, we should do the synopsis first and then you can do it. Paradise, or is it? That's it. Because really, there's not really a good way to sum this up. I mean, white people invade the island and wreak havoc and want to develop it, and the natives grow restless. I mean, what does that sums up so much of historical everything.
True.
And I don't. That makes it sound so serious, which it isn't. Although it addresses serious issues. God, I feel like this is going to be another one of those episodes where we start talking about serious things, and it's really a lighthearted, fun comedy.
Although I think that lighthearted comedies often, even if they're not intending to make social commentary, they end up doing that sometimes. And this is one of those where there's a lot of subtext, whether it's intentional or unintentional, that really talks about
It's insane.
colonization, gentrification, land development, real estate, all kinds of different things, all-inclusive resorts. It connects to all of those things and kind of discusses them, but with a really just thin plot, stringing it all together. In fact, if you look at it, it's really kind of the same plot as UHF. That the big corporation is trying to destroy the little guy, and
no,
because
sorry. Listen, there are so many David and Goliath stories, because that's really what we're talking about here.
Yes.
That you can't. I refuse to allow you to parallel this to UHF because UHF was a comedic failure on so many levels. If we're really going to go there, if you want to do that, not to say that Club Paradise isn't technically, but there are actually funny moments, and I laughed and I didn't fall asleep, and there are so many other things that didn't happen that happened in UHF.
Well, it's not as outrightly slapstick. It's a different kind of humor. So. Yeah. But
we're going down a dark hole very early.
But what I think is interesting, it actually isn't just white people invading. It's because Robin Williams moves there, and they're cool with him because he's not trying to take over anything or buy out anything, and he's chill and relaxed, and so they're all cool with him. And the British are already there, but to a small degree at this point. And it's actually
all of those people are foreigners. Go ahead.
Yes, and it's actually the white guy with the all-inclusive working with the prime minister who is a local to sell it to a Middle Eastern developer.
Oh,
and
corruption?
So you kind of have all these groups working together. And so greed is presented the same way it always is that it's the David and Goliath. Greed is going to destroy this paradise.
Yeah, but it's generally predominantly those Caucasian descendants that are infringing upon
yes
those of color.
Yes.
Right.
And that is happening here. And then, like I said, it's 80s, so they kind of bring in that Middle East developer because that was a fear at the time as well, is that everything was being bought up by Saudis or people from different Middle Eastern countries that had oil money.
Yep, fair enough. And now we just think it's all the Asians because it is.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough.
So basically being bought up by non-locals of all different persuasions. But yes, the traditional, and when we're looking at the colonization aspect, it was definitely the white people.
Yes. All the Spaniards. The Europeans, really, in general.
Which is why I was actually very happy in getting into the film. A little ways I realized, oh, thank God, they're not going to go the terrible and obvious route of making a lot of fun of the locals. Is that it was actually the other way around, is that all of the people acting idiotically were the white tourists.
Oh, this is true.
And I appreciated that.
This is true.
Because I thought they were going to go the other route and be like, just constantly groaning at the dumb jokes that they were making at the expense of the locals.
No, I mean, there's some stereotypes in there, but it's like the weed smoking, like everybody smokes weed in Jamaica. I mean... I don't understand this, or that every Jamaican has smoked weed. Like, that's not really real. You could talk to my family. That's not true. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different things that way, or that, everybody is a Rastafarian, which is also not true. Funny enough, it's predominantly Protestant. The country is. So there are a lot of different things there that you can sort of look and see, but it isn't bad. It isn't awful. And I think what actually helps lend to it is that there are multiple Jamaicans, sort of famous Jamaicans, actually in the script. So I think that, Jamaicans looking a fool, they're not going to really do. In fact, like Jimmy Cliff sort of calls it out to Robin Williams when he wants him to wear some like fancy clothes. He's like, what is this? Like, I'm not wearing this crap.
What does he call it? He calls it the Babylon clothes?
Yeah, the Babylon clothes. Like the oppressor. Like, literally, like, you're oppressing me by making me wear these clothes, and you're not allowing me to identify as myself, which, is a problem, right?
And what is it they're singing? Is Island in the Sun or something?
Island in the Sun, which was made famous by Harry Belafonte.
And you can see that they're just annoyed as hell to be doing this song.
Right, because it's like a tourist song.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're having to wear these ridiculous outfits. And so it does make fun of that whole what tourists expect to see.
Well, it's also what tourists do see.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to an all-inclusive, that is sort of, I mean, it's not the shacks necessarily, but that is sort of what that is, really.
Right. You don't see the reality of a place. You see this image of a place that often the tourists want to see.
Correct. I mean, it's wonderful. Okay. Wow. That's we're derailing. Let me get us back on track first. Let's do quotes. What's your quote or podcast title? Do you have one? Oh God, I'm scared. You're laughing. There's several. I'm looking at your page.
Well, I really liked when Peter O'Toole said, if this world's going to hell in a bucket, I want to hold the handle. But I think the one that would be my top was, you do not save a marriage without air conditioning.
Oh, that's pretty good. That is actually a pretty good one.
That's especially relevant for me because you know what happens to me in the heat.
I think after we go through this segment, we should talk about what happens when you're at a resort in a developing country. Possible things that can go wrong.
Okay, good. You just, as long as you don't tell the Daytona story.
I mean, I might. Who knows? I mean, it is the weekend of Daytona. The race is happening actually right now.
Oh, well, hey, we got to get back to the television then.
Get back. I've been at this computer all day. So my favorite quote was actually when Robin Williams says to Jimmy Cliff, when the police are chasing them and like Jimmy's literally picking up a machete, he goes to like figure out how to fight them and make his way while the police are chasing him. And Robin Williams says, "Oh, sure, go start a revolution. It's not going to look good on your resume, Like, and in his sarcasm, he sort of talks about, I mean, that's part of it. If you do start a revolution, if you are that radical, you'll always be framed as such partially, right? So, I mean, that is a very valid point. Also, the idea of colonization and the idea of uprising against your oppressor, I feel like we're still doing that in this country right now with the current administration. Not to get political, but
you got political.
I did get political. It happens. It happens, folks. But yeah, just this idea about invasion and gentrification, and not only just gentrification in a, positive light in terms of creating jobs and building the country, but also taking a little bit of what the country is about, and offering up its land and its beauty in exchange for this tourism, which, is a staple to any small island's money.
Survival.
Yeah. And it's necessary for the economy. So it's very tough because, I've been back to Jamaica because of family weddings, and we've stayed at these all-inclusive resorts, which are extremely lovely. The folks there are really wonderful. The staff is really great. I think that specifically at this resort, the staff is treated well because they treat their clientele also very well. So I think that's always, you can always see that piece come out.
The one that we go to, or the one in the movie?
No, the one that we go to.
Okay.
But it is sort of like the movie where it's predominantly like I'm like the most, woman of color there. There were a couple this time, people of color this time that I actually saw, but predominantly it literally is Americans, Europeans being served by Jamaicans who are or pretty much all people of color. So the distinction and the differentiation between the two, and you are doing hokey things like sailboats and glass bottom boats and water skiing and
or
the Hobie Cat.
Right, or the guy at Dunn's River who was doing the hot or wet, wet, wet instead of hot, hot, hot.
Oh,
yeah. The whole like goofy tourist thing.
Yeah.
That even, because what is it you said to him? You were like, you said something about it, and he was like, yeah, for the dollar.
I mean, and that's what it is. They're playing their part in order to have the tourism be so strong and to go ahead and be a part of that culture. And they need it, truthfully. I mean, the island needs it. It has only so many resources. And, agriculturally, while they might have a couple of resources, companies aren't flocking to the island to go ahead and open up or utilize and export all of these resources. And there are only so many. So the beauty of the island is a part of it. The beauty of the island in this movie is a part of it.
And
so
trying to save that.
And try to save that. And I would say if you want to go to any of these all-inclusive places, I would say go. But also, I would say get off the property with under guided tours. Get off the property and go places like, shopping centers, or go places like rafting or climbing the falls, because at least that way you'll be able to interact with natives of the country, Jamaicans, or in any country that you go to that's like this, you'll be able to interact and at least see what the country is. Also, you'll be able to actually see the countryside and what people are actually living in, and just so you have a better grasp on the country. That would be my advice.
Well, and as with anywhere, treat the staff well.
Because please treat the staff well. They're people. Everybody's a person. Golden rule, that deal.
Yeah, and not treating them as a spectacle. Like, God knows, when you're in Jamaica, don't ever say "ya man" to anyone, or "hey man," or trying to be cute like that, because it's not cute, it's not funny, and they're gonna smile because they want the tip, but it's not cool.
Yeah. So in this strain, and I don't know how we should do any of this truly. So I am Jamaican. So in doing research for this podcast, I felt the need to do some serious soul searching so that you guys would understand what my country is all about. And I don't know if this is the right place or not, but should I go for it?
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, let's go for it here. I do want to add one thing in real quick because it may connect to the history. Is that there's a point early on you brought up the fear of rebellion and rebelling against the oppressor, and there's an early scene where Peter O'Toole, because he is the British representative there, he is Governor Anthony Croydon Hayes, and at one point he's talking with Robin Williams' character, which is Jack Monaker, and he's talking about the native peoples to the island rising up and rebelling, and there's a British couple sitting there having tea, and the tea glasses are shaking because the people are nervous and shaking. And so I thought it was an interesting commentary on people want to go to these beautiful places, but they're often afraid of the local population and what might happen.
Yeah, and here's the thing. In any country where there is such a dichotomy, like such a very pronounced dichotomy between those that have and the have-nots, there invariably is going to be a strain, right? So in criminal justice, we call it strain theory. So there's a strain, and that those who don't have are really trying to get with the Joneses, right? And try to get all of those pieces. And some of the means that they're doing so are illegal means. So things like, violence and drugs and trafficking and kidnapping and all that stuff can actually happen. So just to be aware, I mean, that happens anywhere. Like in the States, we live in South Florida. That happens here. So in any case, when you think that you're going to paradise, that's all well and great, but don't be dumb. Like anything else, utilize your common sense, which is obviously not so common anymore, and make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. I wouldn't be flashing off your 10-carat diamond ring anywhere. That's dumb. And just be mindful of those who are around you and those who do not have, and they might want yours.
And know what you're doing and where you're going.
Right.
And that's why having a guide of some type is helpful. I think the funniest moment when we were in Jamaica a few months back for a wedding was at customs. There was a woman, I don't remember where she was from, which country, but she was basically saying she was just going to go off wandering in the city, and they were looking at her like, are you out of your mind?
Oh, that she was going to take a Jutsa bus. English translation. She was going to take a local bus that's not government run to a destination, and she has no idea where to find said bus or who to talk to, or it's not supervised or regulated really. So yeah.
Everyone
was fearing for her life because it's a dumb move. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, it's sort of like taking a Lyft or an Uber, but they have no actual regulation. So you're literally just getting in somebody's minivan. That's literally what it's like. So that's not advisable. Just FYI. I'm not going to talk about Jamaica here, actually. We're going to talk about good, bad, and ugly. And then after you do production notes, I'll go into Jamaica, if that helps. Does that help?
It does.
Okay. And I think that helps the actual flow, because once we start talking about the production and where it's filmed, then we can talk about the island a little bit more. So not to stomp on the film, we're going to do good, bad, and ugly. And the cats are in the room. Hey, all right, good, bad, and ugly. You're good.
I think I already gave away my good. It was that the Jamaican people, or the people who are meant to populate this Caribbean island, are not presented in a negative manner for the most part. And there is a specific section at the end I'm going to come back to in a little bit, but I feel like for the most part it was everyone else who was there acting the fool, and they were all, again, forced to make a dollar and to work for them, but you could see the looks on their faces. In fact, there's the great moment where she says, "This morning is breakfast jump up." And because all the tourists are looking at this table of
there's a national strike and no one came to work and there's no electricity, and so there's this national strike that's happening in St. Nicholas, and So basically, it's sort of like fend for yourself. Hey, tourists.
Because breakfast jump up is you jump up and you go make your own breakfast.
Exactly. So, I mean, things happen that you have to be aware of when you visit, developing nations. Just saying.
I don't know how to make ackee and saltfish, so I would have been out of luck there.
Well, actually, technically, the electricity wouldn't have mattered because they probably had a gas stove, truthfully.
Right.
So they probably would have had gas unless there wasn't a gas delivery, and that would be a different conversation altogether.
All right. Ackee for everyone.
I mean, you're making it?
Sure.
Okay. You're not making it. So what was your good? I forgot.
Was the representation of the peoples. They weren't just played as a joke.
Cool. So mine was location. I mean, if you want to see really beautiful pictures of Port Antonio, Jamaica, this is it. It's a really great representation of the island and just how natural beauty, just of its natural beauty, I should say. And my second one is actually the soundtrack.
Yes, soundtrack is fantastic.
It's pretty legit, and including in the soundtrack in my head is also the songs that they also played throughout the film. So not just the official soundtrack, but the soundtrack that they actually utilized within the film.
And the fact that famous Jamaican musician Jimmy Cliff plays one of the lead roles of Ernest Reed.
Yeah.
And it was great.
They have a lot of Jamaicans in this that you might not know.
I do not, because I know you're gonna tell me.
Yes. So you're bad?
My bad was I felt like the story and the plot was a little too thin. It felt very strung together, and like some pieces were missing. And I think it was, I read an interesting discussion on this from Roger Ebert, of all people, who I don't always like his reviews, but he said something that I thought was interesting about Harold Ramis. And Harold Ramis, I love a lot of his writing and his directing, but I do think he matured as time went on. And some of these early ones, he called them leisure comedies. And in saying that, Ebert said he was his own worst critic, because he's saying that what we're seeing is sort of some funny inspirations that never come together all the way. They never are fully cohesive and never really connect and give you the big laugh. Like, it's a great idea. It just doesn't always pay off like it should. And I agree with that. I also think it's interesting that Ramis said that originally the casting was going to be
Bill
Murray in the Jack Monaker role, the Robin Williams role, and John Cleese instead of O'Toole. And what he said was that the dynamic would have been the opposite, is that Bill Murray is more low-key and Cleese would have been more manic. Instead, it was more reversed with O'Toole and Williams, and that he felt like that sort of shifted the dynamic they had originally intended when working on the script. And so he said that may have thrown some off kilter a little bit, but I really think it was more just that it needed a couple more rewrites to make some of that humor work a little more thoroughly.
But part of it was that they had so many rewrites. I think they had like 6 writers on in 6 years and all sorts of craziness. So it was sort of like get it done or not get it done. At this point, it was almost too many rewrites.
And that is always a bad sign when you have that. Whenever you see that many writers in the credits, it usually means trouble.
And it was trouble.
And one of the rewrites was done by Harry Shearer, who, Spinal Tap and Simpsons, he does a lot of the voices for, but only 2 words from his draft ended up in there. Do you know what they were?
Yeah, Club Paradise.
Yes.
And that's it.
And he
named it.
He had what was it? The name that he wrote under was something Roboto.
Yeah, exactly.
And Ed Roboto or something.
Yeah, because it was pointless. Like he didn't feel right having credit for this film at all, period, because it's not reflective of what he did on this work.
Exactly.
So, so my bad, sadly, which he was nominated for a Razzie for it, was Peter O'Toole's performance.
Was he drunk?
I mean, well, here's the thing is that he was added very late in the game. So he gave a very lackadaisical approach to his performance, which, okay, in all honesty, I mean, in this type of setup, that governor that's appointed by the queen to be at an island, they're not really supposed to have any actual power. Like, they're just really chilling. Okay. So to be fair, he was supposed to be a chill person in the situation in general. That position is. So I think that's reflective of it, but it was sort of like, dude, can you show up? Like, can you show up a little bit? Can you show up? Can you deliver the lines with a little more emphasis on the correct syllable? Like, it's a lobble. Can you just show up? That was my sort of critique of that. But he's Peter O'Toole, and at this point he could do whatever the hell he wanted. So there's that. And he was in Jamaica drinking. So
I do think he was trying to play it like casual and low key, but he just comes across as though he's drunk and or stoned I mean,
he could really be both.
Or having a stroke. I don't know, but
No, he wasn't having a stroke.
He looks like he's in trouble. Although he does get a funny scene where he's wandering around Club Paradise saying, what is it? Something about this being an orgy pit and seminal fluid. And he has like a little...
Oh, yeah, he has like a little diatribe.
Yeah, which
you're sort of like, what just happened?
Just to hear Peter O'Toole say seminal.
Yes, seminal fluids, right? So it's, Peter O'Toole was my
orgy
bad.
Pit.
Okay, all right. You're having too much fun saying orgy pit.
Orgy pit.
Exactly. Let's get to the ugly before you become my ugly. Just saying, what's your ugly?
My ugly is, as I was saying I was going to come back to, was that despite the positive way that most of the people are represented, it's the way that the prime minister is later depicted. Now, he's depicted as just a greedy bastard through much of it, and that's
corrupt.
Fine. That's corrupt. But greed is depicted very much the same, as I was saying earlier, of people trying to take what the little guy has and crush them in the process. But in this case, there's a particular couple of scenes at the end. Specifically, the first one is in their capital, in the chambers where they're wearing the British robes and wigs. And he's, declaring war and railing against Club Paradise and the rebels and everything. And they're wearing the traditional clothing. And they're kind of made to look like idiots who are only parroting the legal and governmental systems that were put in place by the British. And they don't really know what they're doing, it looks like. And he's saying words like infamosity instead of infamy, because he says that, a day which will live in infamosity.
Right.
And it sort of perpetuates the idea, as we discussed with Gandhi, that without the white people around to run things, everything would fall apart. It's just a sham. And you see, the henchmen's wigs are crooked. And O'Toole and Joanna Cassidy, who plays the character of...
Terry Hamlin.
Yes, Terry Hamlin. She was also Zora in Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah.
Not to be confused with Zora from Glow.
Correct.
Who's also the voice of Unikitty. But
Unikitty! Sorry. Wow, that's a whole lot of everything thrown together.
O'Toole and Cassidy, they share a little smile when this scene is going on, and it makes it appear like a silly spectacle, which it is, but not for the reasons that I think were intended. And so it kind of makes them look like fools who don't know how to run a country and don't know how to run a government. And though it's specifically making fun of this one prime minister character and his minions, it unfortunately, I think, is also suggesting something about these Caribbean nations as a whole.
Well, new Caribbean nations that might have just been, given independence.
Right.
Yeah.
But it still, I felt, was a little problematic. And the same thing with because Robin Williams says, this is the only country where the Constitution is written in pencil, which is a funny line, but it also is sort of making fun of that same thing. And also the scene with the soldiers when they're in the uniforms, they look not only inexperienced, but childish and incompetent, like kids who have been given army gear. And it just looks like... It is poking fun at an entire group of people, specifically these island nations, and not just at the people involved in this particular part of the plot. So I found that to be a bit problematic.
So my ugly is along those same lines in a way. So at the very end, when they're having this big revolution, right, they essentially need to get rescued by Peter O'Toole's character, right? So it's like, no matter what the men do, the men of color do, whether it's trying to run their government or whether it's throwing a revolution of their government, they need Governor Anthony Croydon Hayes, aka Peter O'Toole, to save the day and ride in on his horse, literally.
A white horse.
A white horse. This white man wearing a red coat on a white horse, with his pomp and circumstance and his uniform, his British uniform, to save the day. And basically say, you must stop by order of the Queen, as if even though they are a sovereign nation, they will never be a sovereign nation. So I was like, I don't know. Like, they really were sort of already working it out, kind of, and brokering the deal because the investors left. But it just heightened this whole other thing, like the country will never be able to run on its own.
Right. That it needs the white people to come in and show them the way and make sure that everything stays level. And
civilized.
Civilized. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, I don't know. Hell, I think a little revolution is good. That's just me, but I'm a rebel.
Well, especially against a corrupt government.
I mean, I listen, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. I can't even talk about any country's government when we have our own freaking issues.
Well, yeah, I guess in the end he is declaring a national emergency so that he can
Shut
build
the hell
a
up.
resort.
I don't even want to go there. Freaking national emergency bullshit that's happening right now in this country. that old, see, like, how do we always pick the light and fluffy movie and we decide to go ahead and dissect all of these other like layers within the movie that, you know, my 10-year-old self didn't give a shit.
Well, I think media doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No, it doesn't.
And it's a product of its times, which is why we say that these movies are all culturally relevant, even if people might not think so.
They are.
Because it is a product of its time, especially when Peter O'Toole says, well, the Americans will want to move in and turn it into Miami, or the Russians will want to move in and turn it into Albania. And, you know, this kind of place makes a great missile base or money laundering operation. And so he's basically talking about all these ways it can be ruined. And those were still very real fears in some ways, but also very much 80s fears as well. And so it's very much talking about what's going on at that time period.
Right. So, yeah, I think we're ready for production notes. So are you ready?
Well, yes, but I know you did a ton of research for this one.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to do the quick rundown, and then I don't know if you want to do production notes, and then I'll do Jamaica launchings, or a little mini history on Jamaica. So directed by Harold Ramis, produced by Michael Schoenberg, screenplay by Harold Ramis and Brian Doyle Murray, story by Ed Roboto, Tom Leopold. I love how his name is Ed Roboto. Tom Leopold, Chris Miller, and David Standish. Music.
And?
Oh, who do I have an and?
And it was also written by, in fact, I think he's given final credit for, just a second.
Okay. So, cinematography by Peter Hanan, edited by Marion Rothman, distributed by Warner Brothers. The release date was July 11th, 1986. Running time is 95 short minutes. The budget was $15 million, but they just did a little bit over $12 million. And on Rotten Tomatoes, they got 11% from reviewers and 35% from the audience, which I find amazing. I think it's definitely better than 35%, especially since UHF got some like whopping like 80% or 85%. Like, this is definitely at least a 50 to 65% movie. I would think that 5 out of 10 people, 6 out of 10 people would like this movie.
Well, I think if you're watching it with the eyes of the pieces we're talking about through that lens, but if you're just watching it in the background, maybe not as much.
You think? I don't know. I really enjoyed it just as a standalone funniness. I mean, you have and I know we're going to talk about the cast, you have a pretty good cast here. You have SNL regulars, you have comedic talent within it. And I think there are some very funny moments.
Not just SNL regulars. You have like almost the entire cast of SCTV, which was an amazing Canadian skit comedy show that so many people got their start on, and so many are in this movie. In fact, if the plane of tourists had gone down, you would have lost most of the cast of SCTV. But of course, we only get one of the two brothers of Bob and Doug McKenzie in here. We only have Rick Moranis. We don't have Dave Thomas. But we've got everyone else, like Eugene Levy and, they're not all listed on here, are they? And I can't look them up.
Oh, wait.
Because the internet's
You're talking about, no, are you talking about Andrea Martin?
Yes.
Yeah, she's on there.
And Joe Flaherty.
Yeah, he's
and
on
Robin
there.
Duke. And did I say Eugene Levy or did you just say?
Yes, you said it.
So yeah, the comedic talent on display is pretty phenomenal.
It is. I totally agree. And, at least IMDb gives it a 4.9 out of 10. So that makes me feel like, at least half the people that watch this generally would like it.
And I found that name. It's Brian Doyle Murray, who is Bill Murray's brother.
Correct.
And also plays the character of Voight Zerb.
Yep.
Is it Zerb or Zerby? I can't remember. But he is the owner of the big all-inclusive on the island already.
Brand new shiny one.
And he's working in cahoots with everyone, the Middle Eastern money guys and with the prime minister to make this deal happen. But he also, I think, did the final version of the script. I think he's given credit for it.
Okay, not where I looked. Screenplay by. Yeah, I said it.
Did you say Brian Doyle Murray?
Yeah, I said it.
Sorry. I wasn't listening.
Obviously.
66%.
66 fucking percent for you. All right, mister. So your production notes.
You said you had a side note?
Yeah, the IMDb. I said it already. Wow, that's twice in this podcast. I have listened to every single thing that you said so far and commented on it. Moving on. Go ahead. Your production notes. Production notes with Parry. Hey. Yeah.
Well, as we talked about, a lot of people shifted around in the making of this. John Landis was actually going to be the director, but Ramis replaced him, as well as, of course, Bill Murray and John Cleese, who dropped out. I liked this one. The name of the plane on Joe's airline is, the joke is The Charter They Come, but it's actually a joke on a movie Jimmy Cliff was in called The Harder They Come in 1972. So I thought that was pretty fun. I like that it was actually based on a terrible Club Med vacation that a couple of the writers had. And the original name for it was Club Sandwich until it was eventually called Club Paradise.
I would not have seen a movie called Club Sandwich.
Well, there
doesn't make any sense to me.
There was a lot of food-related movie names in the early 80s. There was like Hot Dog the movie and Hamburger. There were Meatballs. Okay. There were a number of them.
Yeah, I've seen none of those. So maybe there you go.
Maybe that's why Weird Al always wanted to sing about food.
Maybe he was just hungry, like how I am right now. That's all relative.
I also found out that there were a number of other similar movies that came out around the same time, and the movie had been delayed in its release, and Ramis was nervous. He said, Last Resort, Water, and Hot Resort all came out, and he said, my heart stopped each time one of them was released, but fortunately for us, all of them failed. Unfortunately, his did too. So...
yeah, it just wasn't, I don't know if, I always talk about these things, like, what are the movies that I'm willing to go to the movie theater for versus what are the movies that I'm willing to wait for it to come out on pick your choice of media type.
Although that was different at the time, of course.
It was, but eventually it would get to VHS. It would just take, 8 months, 9 months or something to get to, like, a tape.
Even, this was 86, so... yeah, but at that point, not even everyone had a VCR. I don't think we got ours till 87.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on now. Don't be ridiculous.
Sometimes we were a little behind.
Don't be ridiculous. Oh, yeah, you didn't listen to actual music till you were like a teenager.
we won't have the musicals on vinyl discussion just now.
So a couple of things that you should know. Jamaica roughly is twice the size of Delaware, to give you an idea. Where it was filmed was Port Antonio, which is in the parish of Portland. It's also the third largest port for the island, and it's predominantly bananas and coconuts that get exported from there. Cocktail was also filmed there. So the infamous Reach Falls that you see, that actually is located in Port Antonio.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we're going to try to put up a ton of stuff on the website, so you should really check that out. Like, I'll have pictures of or maps of the country, and just so you understand where Port Antonio is and things like that. Jimmy Cliff was born James Chambers. He's actually a reggae and ska musician, a singer, actor. He was inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. Adolf Caesar actually died of a heart attack 4 months before the release of the movie.
And he plays the prime minister.
Correct.
That name, like
Adolf Caesar.
Do you give someone that name so that they're going to have to overcome adversity for their whole life? Like, you've got to do something really incredible so that people aren't judging you by your name when you're named Adolf Caesar. I mean, I always thought the same thing about Buster Posey. Like, you know, he's really had to prove himself at something so that people weren't just always fucking with him about his name. And I feel like Adolf Caesar might be the ultimate example of that.
What's also interesting is his actual name in the film. So you won't know this, but
I do actually.
Oh, you do
yes.
you? You know what Solomon Grundy is?
Oh, I was thinking Solomon Grundy from Justice League and all the DC comp. No, I'm kidding. That I did my research and I do see that it was a poem and in some songs, but I'll let you inform me.
No, but that's not it. So Solomon Grundy is actually a dish, and it's herring. It's pickled fish pate, usually served with crackers. So it's it's also pickled herring and onion, like Solomon Grundy. Like, it's literally a bitter, fishy, pickled item.
So is that what the songs were based on? Like Monty Morris, released a ska song in '64 called Solomon Grundy. But it says the lyrics were based on the nursery rhyme, which is Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday, christened on Tuesday, married on Wednesday, that whole thing.
Right.
And it says they were based on that. And then there are a number of other Jamaican musicians who have released versions of songs called Solomon Grundy.
So I don't know. You'd have to look at every single one and then look at its actual meaning. But yeah,
look up the lyrics.
Exactly. But it's actually a dish. So
interesting. No, I did not know that.
Okay. Let's see. There are also some very famous Jamaicans in this movie aside from Jimmy Cliff. So you have Earl China Smith. So he's the guitarist in the band. Kathy Levy was a Miss Jamaica. Leonie Forbes. So she's considered the first lady of theater and film in Jamaica. And then you also have Louise Bennett, or Miss Lou. She is really considered the mother of all Jamaican culture. She hosted radio shows for BBC, worked across all England, really giving performances regarding Jamaican folklore, books, poetry in Jamaican patois, which is the language that we speak in. So the official language of Jamaica is English. And it is the Queen's English. It is British English. So like color, we don't spell C-O-L-O-R. We spell it C-O-L-O-U-R. So it has that O-U thing happening. So it's British. It's British English.
It's also the language that I hear when I'm in trouble.
What?
Is that you will speak
patois?
to me in patois sometimes.
Yeah, they're stages to my anger, which actually makes a lot of sense now that I researched a couple of different things. So
it shifts into Spanish at some points, but patois is prominent.
So it's English first, then I go to Spanish because I've lived here for so long, and then I go to Jamaican patois. So that's the thing. So Jamaican patois, sometimes also called Jamaican Creole. Sometimes people say it's a slang, but it's not really a slang. It's an actual language, and there are specific ways in which to pronounce things. So I'm gonna put together some videos and that will help with the pronunciation or understand why we say things the way that we say it. But Louise Bennett really was at the forefront for really delivering, Jamaican folklore and making sure that people understand. And she used patois in order to go ahead and actually convey the Jamaican people and the everyday struggle of Jamaican people. And she performed a song called Data Light, which we would know as Deo. So Harry Belafonte re-recorded her song, and so we'll have that video up there as well. Her singing Data Light, and then him actually doing the Banana Boat song, right? Deo. And that piece as well. And then, of course, everybody knows Deo from freaking Beetlejuice. So it's very interesting that actually happened. But anyway, Louise Bennett was also in the film as well. And then, just a little bit of Jamaican history, just so that you just don't think it's this pretty island, because it is beautiful, but there's much more to it. So it's the third largest island in the Greater Antilles. It's the fourth largest island in the Caribbean. It's 90 miles from Cuba and approximately 119 miles from Hispaniola, which is Haiti and Dominican Republic together. It contains 14 parishes. So I guess the equivalent would be like how we have states here. That would be sort of like an equivalent. So it has 14 parishes. Originally, it was inhabited by the Arawak Taino people, which was really, they inhabited predominantly most of South America and the Caribbean. And there's a couple of interesting pieces, like when it was settled. It was settled by those folks first, and then the Spanish came in 1494 and started to go ahead and settle in. There's a lot of propaganda in Arawakian. Jamaica is actually Xaymaca. Land of wood and water, or land of springs. When Columbus arrived in 1494, he ended up bringing African slaves to Jamaica. And the thing is always, indigenous people died of disease, which they did die of disease. But some of it was actually the Taino peoples really felt like some of the Spaniards were mythical beings of the underworld who were going to eat their flesh. So they rebelled in different areas. So like in Hispaniola, they had a large uprising, and in other places they had a large uprising. So then it became, so then they had ritual cannibalism and would use like body parts as trophies. So then it became like, oh, all of these native or indigenous people are cannibals. And that story has spread out throughout time. And actually, one of the musical artists, the Mighty Sparrow, put out a song called The Congo Man, basically talking about, white women going to Africa and that they get eaten, basically, and how, and it comes from the point of view from the Africans eating them. But it's because of all of this hype that was actually being surrounded about Africans being cannibalists and, the islanders and the natives being so wild, right?
Yeah, Sparrow is great. If you've never heard of the Mighty Sparrow, definitely go and look up a lot of his music. And as we were discussing earlier,
you're stealing my thunder for soundtrack.
Okay.
That's totally what's happening right now.
Okay.
I am so not done.
I am stepping back from
Thank
the
you.
Sparrow.
England took over in 1655 and renamed it Jamaica. It became a large sugar exporter. So it brought over initially indentured Irish laborers, which were really political prisoners. They were also dependent on African slaves. Then they emancipated all the African slaves in 1838. But then they replaced it with Chinese and Indian indentured labor. So just all of these people just kept coming over and coming over. And then additionally, in 1660, the Jewish refugees were escaping from the Spanish Inquisition, and they would go to England, but then they would go to Jamaica. So when people talk about this concept of ethnicity, especially in this country, it's very interesting. It's literally a black or white conversation. Haha. Knee slapper there. No funniness. Okay. It's not a black and white conversation in Jamaica.
I as the white guy, I was not going to laugh at any conversation of race. So
you should totally laugh in this one. It really isn't a black and white conversation, because so many people like literally we say that we're all mixed up. Like we're mix up. Like we're just always like our ethnicity and our descendancy. It's all mixed up entirely. What did I do? I did 23andMe or whatever. And it's like I'm a third African, West African. I'm a third European, all over the place, and then I'm a third Asian. So, and it's all over the place within each one. So we really are truly a mixed up people, ethnically. Yeah, I said it right. Okay. We gained independence on August 6th, 1962 from the United Kingdom. And Kingston is the capital with almost 1 million people. And like I said, there is a lot of mixed ancestry, so much so that our motto is out of many, one people. And it's, and I said a lot of those European, Chinese, Indian, Lebanese, Ghana, Cameroon. And then we also like to go ahead and we like to immigrate to different areas. So the United States, the UK, and Canada are pretty much our fave areas, but you can find Jamaicans everywhere. We populate and we spread the earth. It's pretty awesome. In fact, a couple of really famous Jamaicans who you might not know that are, I'll give you a list anyway, in a sec. And then Jamaica is known as a Commonwealth realm. So I didn't really understand this until today. So essentially, Queen Elizabeth II still has a representative within the country and is still the head of state, technically. So in name. So she's still the head of state in places like UK, Antigua, Australia, Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Canada, Grenada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Solomon Islands. But she's just a head figure, right? But there's also still a representative of the country. So the Governor General, which is what Adolph Caesar played. And our Governor General of Jamaica right now is Sir Patrick Allen, and he's been there since 2009. And then the head of government in Jamaica is the Prime Minister, and currently it's the Prime Minister Andrew Holness, and he was a Prime Minister before in 2011, and then he is again. And his wife also won a seat in Parliament. So they're actually serving at the same time, which is really odd. I don't know how that happens, but it's very interesting. Some famous Jamaicans, other than Bob Marley and Jimmy Cliff, 3 prime ministers actually stand out. Alexander Bustamante, who was the first prime minister, Edward Seaga, who was a record producer and record company owner, actually. And he was of Lebanese, Scottish, Indian, and African descent, FY. Another prime minister, Michael Manley. But then you start having people like Naomi Campbell, right? It's a model. Lester Holt. Michael Chin Lee, who's a business investor and philanthropist, Chinese Jamaican. Malcolm Gladwell, right? Author. Tyson Beckford, Chinese Jamaican. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who's Scottish Jamaican. The founder of VP Records, Vincent Randy Chin. They're also the largest independent label and distributor of Caribbean music. Chinese Jamaican. Kerry Washington, Scottish Jamaican. Sean Paul, Jewish Jamaican. Chris Blackwell, Island Records founder, Jewish Jamaican descent, brought you such acts as Bob Marley, U2, Robert Palmer, Etta James, Melissa Etheridge, and the Cranberries. So produced albums for them. Jacob de Corva, founder of the Jamaican newspaper, also Jewish Jamaican. You've got different music artists such as Gregory Isaacs, Peter Tosh, Barris Hammond, Beanie Man, Shaggy, Shabba Ranks, Super Cat, Buju Banton, Third World Inner Circle, all Jamaican. Also of Jamaican descent, Notorious B.I.G., Busta Rhymes, and Heavy D.
Yes.
Some awesome Jamaican athletes as well as descendants. So Usain Bolt, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, Floyd Mayweather. So Jamaicans are everywhere. Oh, and Bob Marley, P.S., was Syrian Jamaican. So we really, I know people always say like, oh, you look like such and such, or you look like you're this type. And I'm like, yes, because I'm probably all of those things. So every Jamaican is probably all of those things. So when you look at them and you're wanting to categorize us or put us in a box, we kind of look at you like you're crazy because there's really no checkbox for us. And I think that really goes for a ton of the Caribbean islands. I mean, we were such a way late over for so many places that how do you even differentiate any longer?
Right.
So that's just a little blurb on Jamaica. I didn't want to go too crazy because really, if you want to know more, you should really know and truthfully, some of those things I didn't know. You should really just take a look and figure it out. But that's a really super brief overview, not so brief overview of Jamaica in general.
You talking about the musicians reminded me that, honestly, if you've never heard Sting and Shaggy perform together...
You're so ridiculous.
They have an album out now.
Well, yeah, okay, you should tell the backstory. Why Sting and Shaggy got together.
What is the...
So he like literally went and like visited Jamaica and was like obsessed. Like just he had never visited Jamaica. And so for those from the UK, it's actually really England's playground. Like a lot of foreigners come from England and come to Jamaica and go to all of the islands really, because it's just an easy transition, right, to go to the islands. And there's always all inclusive, so they really just go to decompress. But so Sting had never been, and then he went and became enthralled, and then he was like, oh, but now I want to produce and I want to combine, and so he called up Shaggy. He like did not want to leave. It's really funny.
Well, and when we saw them live, to see them do Englishmen in New York, but do it as Englishmen and then swap off as Jamaican in New York.
So many Jamaicans in New York, but anyway.
And then to hear the two of them sing "It Wasn't Me" together.
Yes, it's an interesting sight altogether.
And an interesting crowd.
It is an interesting crowd. I don't even know how to phrase that, but I think that's actually what. So through music, I actually think, and I know we're going to soundtrack. Do you have anything else for our production notes?
Some of the actors, but I think we can talk about soundtrack and come back around. I think that's a good segue.
Okay. I think what people don't realize, even those who have listened to Bob Marley's Legend album over repeatedly, is how much political commentary is embedded in every song. There might be that occasional one where it's not, but it truly is interwoven. And not only just in Bob Marley, but in any of the Caribbean nations. It's huge. It's talking about struggle or strife, or making a commentary on stereotypes, right? So literally the Mighty Sparrows song Congo Man is literally regarding the stereotypes of those of African or Native descent. Like it's literally discussing that piece. And they encapsulate all of this in with a catchy tune or a catchy beat, and you're just dancing to it and you're not really listening to all of these said words.
That tastes so good, he wanted more. Me want more.
But the words are very meaningful and impactful, and actually Jamaicans are credited. I mean, you can see by the Notorious B.I.G. They actually had immigrated to New York, and they're credited with, in terms of being Jamaican descendancies, they're credited with helping the hip hop movement in this way. So a lot of the early hip hop was commentary regarding, and I mean, a lot of music sometimes it's just commentary. It's how artists express themselves. But particularly in early hip hop, this was how you expressed yourself, was through that music. Mm-hmm. And it was being used as a catalyst to go ahead and actually look at things that were happening in the nation. And that's the same thing like Louise Bennett was trying to do through her folklore and her tales and discussing it. It's what they're all trying to do culturally, is to bring awareness of the situation, to go ahead and say, hey, these stereotypes aren't necessarily true. This is what's going on in the country. This is what's going on in the neighborhood. And make an actual statement about it and wrap it up in a pretty bow so everybody will buy it, listen to it, and then will get some of that message at least in their head. And
even if they don't, they're helping to propagate it out, and so it travels.
Yeah.
And then other people hear it and hear about that struggle.
Exactly. So like I Shot the Sheriff is not just, hey, I shot the sheriff and not the deputy. That's not really what it's about. If you listen to it, it's literally about corrupt police and the fact that somebody got caught in the crossfire, and that's really what that's about. Mm-hmm. And he's being framed and set up by said corrupt police for the murder of the deputy. And So, like I said, listen to the lyrics a little bit more, understand where it's coming from. It's just not all sunshine and rainbows. There's true meaning, and you'll see messages about oppression and corruption and stereotypes and just all sorts of things.
Right. We're looking at you, everyone who drunkenly sang along to just that lyric because it's all you knew at that party. You know who you are.
I mean, and that's fine. Listen, a lot of it, I mean, music in a way was what Jamaica had. So, I mean, up until a couple of decades ago, they had one freaking channel, and what you would have is radio stations, and what they would play on the radio stations is a lot of American music, country music, things that they could afford. Then they would create things that they were producing, British music. Things like dub became a part of it. So like Jamaicans reinventing American music or British music. So a lot of it was trying to find a way until they found their own voice. That's part of it, right? So imitation in some places, but also music was just uplifting. So this is all that they had, right? You don't have TV. TV's just giving you one channel. And literally it was one channel for a long, like the 90s, like the end of the 80s, early 90s, until you got satellite dish on that island. So you're talking about a long time with people just having one outlet and then having music truly and the radio. So it's a very different thing than what we experience in the States, where we're now and of course they have access to all of those same things that we do, like Netflix and blah blah blah, whatever. But back then, no, I mean, music was it.
And if you want to hear a great song about satellite dishes in Jamaica, Wild Gilbert, which is about Hurricane Gilbert, they do talk about the loss of the satellite dish.
You're so ridiculous right now.
It's the only thing I had to tie in there. That was such a
by Lovin's ear, lovely. And he knows all the words because when we were going through hurricane prep, I would play it for him. And yeah, that's another one. I mean, he raised a ton of money. He raised money for for helping the rebuilding after Gilbert, and they made light of a situation that really wasn't so light. And so in its frivolosity, it's sort of saying like, hey, we lost everything, can't find anything, help.
Yes.
But put it in this cute little song all wrapped up together in a bow
that makes you want to keep singing it and keep turning it over in your head and passing it along, and so it
right.
does spread the message.
Right. So interesting fact about the soundtrack, because we're in soundtrack smashes. The vinyl roughly will cost you anywhere from $20 to $30, but the CD, because it was only released in Europe and Japan, so the lowest one that I see is $50 that it was sold for. But what it's selling for right now is upwards of $200. So,
damn.
And that's the Japanese version. So if you have the Japanese version of Club Paradise, I would suggest that you keep it. It's rare. It's a commodity. I don't know. I guess it didn't end up in the bargain bin. I guess they didn't print that many.
Or you can donate it to this podcast.
Sure. Anytime you want. And the soundtrack is really filled with Jimmy Cliff, a ton of Jimmy Cliff, the Mighty Sparrows on there, Elvis Costello is on there, Well Pleased and Satisfied's on there, and the Blue Rhythm Band is on there as well. To note one thing, Jimmy Cliff's The Lion Awakes is only included on the vinyl and is not on the CD, nor is it released in any other Jimmy Cliff anything. So if you want that song, because it's the first song actually on the vinyl, the only place that you can get it is the vinyl.
And it's surprising because it's a great song, so I'm kind of surprised it wasn't released anywhere else.
Simultaneously, I actually curated this entire list, plus the list of songs that were in the movie. So you have songs from Yellow Man, The Shanties, More Mighty Sparrow, Stuart Copeland, The Kinks, Bob Marley, the Blue Rhythm Band. So more, right? One more. Oh no, that was already there.
And it's interesting because there's so much more in terms of message in the songs than in the movie overall.
I don't know. I think that the movie was doing the same thing that these songs are doing. It's trying to deliver a message in this, all wrapped up in this funny bow. And I think that if that is the actual intention, I mean, we would have had to have spoken to people who are dead now. But if that was the actual intent, I know, sorry, it's a lot of people who died. If this was the actual intention, then they succeeded in a way, because it was, you weren't thinking that you were watching a commentary on British colonialism and the after effects at all. You just thought you were watching a Robin Williams flick, really.
Right.
Yeah. So if that was the messaging, then they did a pretty good job. We also created a playlist on YouTube with all of these songs plus additional soundtrack songs, like the ones that I mentioned, and we'll post that as well on the blog. So there's a lot on the blog. I'm trying to do a better job. But do you have a favorite song?
I think the message they were trying to get across was the domino theory of the Caribbean, that Robin Williams talks about one island falling and then another falling, and then it leads to all-out nuclear war.
You're ridiculous.
And destruction of Cleveland. Cleveland is mentioned several times in the film, and the destruction of Cleveland in particular.
I'm sure all those listening in Indiana loves it. Love this. So actual soundtrack smashes. Do you have a song that you really like from the film?
I actually really loved this soundtrack, and maybe it's because...
I know your critical race theory just kicks in when you listen to this.
Well, yes, a lot of the messaging, but also a lot of it, even if you're not listening to any of the words, it's all just great music. And some of that may be because I've had so much more exposure to soca and calypso and all these different types of music that I was not really listening to before I was with you and your family. And so it's gotten much deeper inside my consciousness, but it's just great music no matter who you are. And much as I really liked like Soldier Take Over by Yellow Man or Grenada by Sparrow, I think my favorite was Third World People.
Oh my
by Jimmy
God,
Cliff.
that's my favorite.
Yes.
Shut up. We didn't even talk about this.
No.
Like I had this big surprised look on my face.
Yes.
What?
It's a great song. And
Okay, let's listen to why you think it's a great song. Go for it.
Well, why I think it's great is because what it is deconstructing is what people are taught versus what is the truth. And especially when the colonizer comes in, they're going to tell you the story of how everything comes from them and that they're the greatest and you need to learn from them. And in this song, he's talking about, we've been told that England and France and Germany and Portugal were all the places where everything began, but, that's not the truth. And they want to keep you down in insecurity and ignorance and poverty. But remember where you come from. Remember where your homelands really are. And also remember that civilization did not go up the Nile. It went down the Nile and reached Europe last. And I really think that the point, he really makes his point in that educate yourself. Don't believe everything you're told. And there is a reason why they're going to tell you this. And you need to understand what that reason is and why you need to find out for yourself who you really are, where you're really from, and, what that means.
Yeah, so actually he says, just for a little bit deeper, I picked it because, so what this movie sort of forced me to do was sort of embrace my Jamaicanness in a way. I'm like, we're doing a movie, it's taking place in Jamaica. Yeah, people need to know about how awesome Jamaica is. Like, my Jamaicanness totally kicked in. And I was actually born there, so I know I sound like some valley girl. It's from years of living in South Florida. Good or bad, it's from years of living in South Florida.
A lot of valleys in South Florida.
Whatever. I sound like a lot of transplanted Americans, unless I'm with my family or I'm on the island, and then it sounds different, but it still sounds like I'm a foreigner because I definitely don't speak Patsa the same way that they do, that islanders who are still there do, or my family, truthfully, especially those that grew up there.
Right.
Because I didn't grow up there. But I grew up enough around it, so there's that piece. But the third world people, to me, where it really transcends is that it's saying, remember where you came from, and while everybody wants to go ahead and point out like it's all these rich European nations and that sort of Portugal and Spain and those pieces. But no, like you came from Africa, you came from India, you came from China, you came in as indentured servants, like over. So, and just remember really that lifeblood and a lot of life in general really came from Africa. So really just educate yourself on this and educate where you truly came from and understand your country's history, and more so than just, oh, Columbus landed here, blah, blah, blah. There was a revolution. Like it sounds oversimplified, but it's not. It's really just understanding who you are, where your ancestors came from, and what type of struggles that they faced.
Mother country, we have been told that it's England, France, Germany, Portugal, since the days of old. But I know that life could not start in a refrigerator. It had to be in an incubator.
And then 2, embracing things like the folklore that came out of Jamaica regarding the Jamaican people and this cultural reviving that really happened in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and continues to happen through storytelling, through songs, through political messages that come out, through authors and poems. There's such a great wealth of culture coming out of my country, and it's sort of, you forget because you're in a different country, right? You're living a very different life, and you might forget to go ahead and get in contact with your roots, as it were, right? Even though I'm reminded of them daily with my family. But still, you just still might not know as much as you want to know or think that you know. So, like today, I went ahead and I ordered a CD of Louise Bennett's folklore songs and listening to them. And I knew some of them already, but I had never heard her probably sing those songs or know those songs because of her. So just different things like that. I think it's good to know. I think it's good to know why things sound the way they do in terms of language and dialect and just how things actually transpired and, the many different dialects that are in such a little country, as well as the many different ethnicities like Syrian. I didn't know, like who knew like that Jewish folks utilized, Jamaica as a refugee space. Like who knew? I didn't know. It's a thing, so just to help your own ignorance, I guess. So when I heard Third World People again today, when I was re-listening for the soundtrack, I was like, that's it. Because I truly, due to this movie, I actually did more research than I've ever done on the country in general, where I was born.
And not just because I'm the white guy in the room, but I feel like what a song like this also really should push everyone to do is to look at the history of colonization, the voyages of quote-unquote discovery, and what the legacy of all of that has been, because a lot of people like to look at it as, it's very easy to look at it as, okay, well, these countries have now been achieved independence and that's no longer a factor, but it is. Colonization has left a legacy in so many countries, and so many places have never been able to recover from that. And there's still, as we talked about with Gandhi, in the way that the country was broken apart and split up, and these divisions were created that have never been healed. And certain economies have never been able to recover. And I think it's very interesting description. I read recently a description of Black Panther as being an Africa that was not decimated by colonization, is what the vision of Wakanda is.
It's not only colonization, right? It's imperialism, the need
Yes.
to go out and conquer everything and to be the
Correct.
biggest and baddest ever. Spain went through it. Europe went through it. UK went through it. The United States goes through it. Like, there's not necessarily this need to have to go ahead and do all of these things now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we should still be perpetuating it, truthfully. So, yeah, lighthearted Club Paradise turned into political message for the day.
Yes, a movie about a surprisingly low-hair Robin Williams and a whole bunch of
Low-
SCTV people.
And Twiggy.
And Twiggy
and Jimmy Cliff.
has been turned into a discussion of colonization, imperialism, and other such, and Jamaican history as a whole.
Yeah.
I like it.
So I do want to say, like, going back to just production notes a little bit, Andrea Martin, I think, just steals my heart and pretty much steals this entire, she like hijacks this movie. She's so freaking hysterical. And the scenes with her are just always hysterical. And the funny part is that I feel like what she goes through as a typical tourist in a third world nation is exactly your experience when you visited Jamaica for the first time. So there are things that you should know if you're visiting a developing nation. You should know that sometimes natural resources or things that you would take for granted they should not be taken for granted.
Utilities.
Like hot water should not be taken for granted. It should also be used sparingly. You should pretty much try to have the quickest shower that you possibly can have because the water will run out. First, the hotness will run out, and then
the water.
Then the water pressure will not be what you would like. That's number one. And learn how to manually flush your toilet. That's number one. Number two, because that can actually happen, right? Well, that didn't happen on that vacation, but it can happen.
I still had long hair, and the water pressure. I tried to take a shower later when everyone had used up all of the hot water and all the water, and there was no pressure, and so I had a trickle trying to clean all this soap out of my long hair, and you were
so joke. I warned you. I warned you. I said, you take too long of a shower in general. You need to speed it up down here because it's not going to work for you. Mm-hmm. And you didn't listen to me. And then it was like the next to last day and the water pressure just died.
Yes.
Because it was like that for the next day too. And you're like, what is this? I'm like, I warned you. This is what happens sometimes.
Part of why my hair is shorter now.
Yep. Oh, is it really? You think? No, it can't really be because of that.
Humidity. But.
And then the second thing is, like things like utilities, like lights, like there will be things called brownouts where the light flickers, or there'll be a blackout because too much power is pulling from the grid. Like you just have to be mindful of all of those things. And bugs, they're copious because it's an island.
They got the night sounds right, though. They obviously
the night sounds are right.
Live night because it is the sounds of Jamaica at night.
It is. It's the damn crickets and the lizards and the croakers and all sorts of craziness things happening. But yeah, so true stories. And, like I said, paradise comes at a cost sometimes. And the cost is sometimes no hot water or, lower pressure. So be aware, folks. You're going to a small nation. It's okay. You have anything else you want to wrap up with?
Well, I did just...
sorry. I have one.
Yes, certainly.
Jimmy Cliff is still freaking touring. He broke his hip last year.
Uh-oh.
He's on the mend, and now he's still touring. So he's touring all over Europe is what I look like.
Nice.
So yeah, he's still touring. So just don't sleep on Jimmy Cliff. I heard he's a pretty energetic performer in general.
Well, I'm sad he actually hasn't done more acting. I thought he was really fun in this movie. I would have loved to have seen him in a few more roles.
Cool Runnings? No? Was he not in Cool Runnings? Or did he do the soundtrack? He did the soundtrack, I know.
Yeah, I don't... He only was in a few things, and he's been in a lot of, documentary stuff and music stuff, but most of it is soundtrack. His actual acting roles, last one was in 2003, so... He's in only about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 or 7 roles.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, he definitely hit a hot streak in the late 80s and 90s in terms of music and acting and all those pieces in his life.
What differentiates this from some of the other comedies is the actors. And of course, Robin Williams, you wind him up and you let him go. And there's a couple scenes where he is obviously just riffing. And he doesn't always accomplish it well here. It seems like maybe there were some areas where Williams didn't know what to do, but then there's some just crazy funny things where he talks about, I gave a young man some advice once. I told him to wear one glove, just one, and the rest was history. And Jimmy Cliff says, who was that? He says, Willie Mays. So, and I think Robin Williams was just making that stuff up.
Probably. I mean, I don't know. So sad that we lost him. So yes, this is why you should also see Club Paradise, because it is, if you're a completist, as I know a lot of you are, this is a Robin Williams flick and you got to watch it. And it was like right before he did like Dead Poets Society, and really like started going off the charts and doing other squirrely things.
Well, I also wanted to comment on Adolf Caesar, and his role in this is meant to be goofy and, overacted, and he's really chewing the scenery in a couple of scenes about talking about like eating your bones and your liver and all kinds of things.
Well, yeah, because it's a flashback to how people really felt like, oh, the natives are. It's a commentary. I'm telling you, I think this really was made about being a commentary on this entire thing, and was just nicely packaged up in a comedy, which is very interesting altogether. Because you think that he's serious, but he's obviously not serious.
Well, and he is such a great actor, but if you've never seen him in A Soldier's Story...
Oh, so good.
Yes.
So good.
And I kept looking at him in this, and I couldn't place him. I was like, I know he was in something great. And A Soldier's Story, yeah.
So good.
He's truly amazing in that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we could go on and on about a lot of the white actors in the film, but I think we've covered enough of that. But what I did want to say is that one thing I think the film, I felt like, and maybe it's because my experience with Jamaicans living in South Florida, is I believe it helps to sort of dispel the idea of Jamaicans as lazy. Because there's the whole...
God, we're so not lazy.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Not
is
lazy.
That the stereotype is sitting on the beach,
smoking weed all day.
No. The beach part, kind of thing from Dave Chappelle. And
no.
What I have seen in my experience is that the hustle is real. Is that it is, the Haymon joke from
In
Living Color about having 22 jobs and things, that is freaking real. And
it is.
Some of the hardest working people I have ever met are Jamaican. And like I said, it's the hustle. It's always finding a way to make a living. And if you've got to work 20 different ways from Sunday and try every possible thing to make it happen, these are the people doing it. And it's been extraordinary to be educated about that. But to see it in the film that, everyone is working at the and yes, they have the stereotypes about the giant bag of weed and the the people who are
the tourists always asking for the weed.
Yes, which is a great commentary as well. Is
the marijuana.
Rick Moranis and Eugene Levy do play a couple of completely idiotic, hapless tourists, but they do it so well.
Seriously.
But yeah, I that was one of the strengths for me, was that though it could have done it better, because the movie is uneven as hell. You have to admit that. But it does depict some things that I haven't seen really depicted too many other places. So.
Yeah, no. I mean, there are many films that are filmed in Jamaica, but very rarely do they ever focus on issues surrounding Jamaica. I mean, other than freaking Cool Runnings talking about the damn bobsled team. And that's all people knew. I mean, now if you mention Jamaica, you're going to get a couple of different answers. It's Bob Marley, Usain Bolt, and Cool Runnings. Weed, maybe rum. Surprisingly, they don't ever talk about sugar, which is one of, a main country export. Like they don't see it as that. All-inclusive resorts you might have in the conversation. But there's so much more to the island. So and it's people. Jamaicans are some of the hardest working people that I know, because they're always trying to make it and make sure that they have enough to provide for their family and thinking about the future and opportunities. And I think that's like that, especially whenever you're an immigrant family. I know that you and I have had many discussions about what generation immigrant are you, mm-hmm. and what did you see your parents do, and what do you then mimic as well. And that's what I saw. I saw my family working a bajillion jobs and learning a bajillion jobs in order to go ahead and make sure that their kids had a better life than they did growing up. And that's what their parents did. That was their example that they were given as well. And so it was like, yeah, having several jobs is sort of a normal thing. I know you look at me all the time like, could you have one more project? And a lot of people look at me one more time. Could you do one more thing, Joelle? Well, that's how that goes. Like, you have multiple hustles and, eventually one is going to pay out or all help the other or all help feed the other or help in their own way. I mean, we have a podcast, for crying out loud, which is helping nothing except for our own amusement. So far.
What, we aren't going to make a living off this someday?
I don't think we're going to make a living off this. And anybody who does a podcast and think they're going to be like the number one podcast and making, book deals and movie deals, and two Dope Queens, you're on HBO, like, that's a misnomer. I think you do podcasts because it's not just a hobby, but it's something that you truly love and are passionate about. So the thing that you happen to be super passionate about and I share is movies. And so that's great that way. So having those outlets as well, and still, promoting those outlets, because you do never know. But back to the original point, having multiple things and having different avenues and getting the word out is sort of in my blood. And I would think that it's true for a lot of immigrant families and a lot of immigrants, especially if you're close to, especially if your lineage grew up in a different way or manner and they just want better for their family and for their kids. So yeah, it's always been very normal for me, even though people look at me like, could you work any harder? I'm like, yeah, I could actually. There's a little bit of time that I have not sliced out. Like when I'm vegging out and giving my brain a rest, I always feel very lazy in those moments because I feel like I should be doing something else. It's in my blood.
So hopefully when you're watching Club Paradise, you now can see it through the lens of all of this discussion as to, some of the the deeper layers that may or may not have been intentional, but are there nonetheless. So I think, again, it is not the perfect film. In fact, it is a very light comedy.
It's very
on the
light.
surface.
It's very popcorn. It's a pizza movie for sure. It's a pizza movie. You can walk up and get another popcorn. It's fine. You're not missing much. It's cool.
Right. On the scale of how many bathroom breaks can you take in this film?
No, I mean, how many times are you going to get popcorn?
Oh, I was going to use the bathroom break one, but
yeah, but you're fine. You're not going to miss much because the overarching theme is still in there and it's throughout, truthfully.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's all that we have. Is that all that you have?
Yeah, no, I was going to try and talk about all the stuff on the wall of his office. Like, is that the Jackson 5 or Gary Coleman or both? But I think we
it's
can.
The Jackson 5. You're so ridiculous right now. Oh my gosh, you're such a gaslighter. So shameless self promo. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. You should definitely check out our website. You haven't seen whatmovie.com, and I'll tell you why. Every post that we go ahead and we put up all these other crazy links. So sometimes it's links to trailers, sometimes it's screen tests. This time it's going to be, Jamaican folklore mixed in with some Harry Belafonte singing that said Jamaican folklore, mixed up with a breakdown of the snake scene in there with the Burmese python. Yeah, like I literally dug up so much awesomeness about this. How to understand or speak Jamaican patois. There are going to be videos too.
But do not attempt to speak the Jamaican patois to Jamaicans at the all-inclusive.
No. You should find somebody in your realm or your circle that you should not even use it. But at least you'll understand when people are saying things. You will at least get the gist of that message. That's really more why it's for in my brain. And then,
but just be sure you do not repeat some of the words that the angry band says as they're walking out after being told they have to wear the uniforms.
Curse words in Jamaica are very different than curse words in America. I could drop all the fucks I want to on this podcast and no one's gonna bat an eye. Not really. They're not. I would never drop those said Jamaican words on the same podcast. Like in my family, it's like shunnable. Like you just can't. I mean, it just not. Anyway. So that's gonna be up on there. I actually put a link to a Golden Jubilee like 4 set of CDs. I know that CDs are so antiquated, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, take it whatever you want. It's a lot of awesome Jamaican music and the progression of Jamaican music. It's a great compilation that's put out. And we're going to have like clips and other stuff. And I'm putting up maps of Jamaica. Like it's like whole Jamaican pride happening all in one shot. And I'm going to have reparations and make sure that Parry puts this all up for you. My white man.
Yes, ma'am.
Exactly. And yeah, and then we created that playlist with the whole soundtrack and the additional songs that are in the movie but not on the official soundtrack as well. So that is why you should check out our website, youhaven'tseenwhatmovie.com. Also check out our social media, Insta, Facebook, Twitter at You Haven't Seen What Movie. We're starting to actually go to a lot of movies that we might or we might not be reviewing, at least as far as I know. So, and we put them up in those events there too. So it's pretty cool. And then let us know what movies you think we should be doing. Let us know what you think about the podcast. Remember, be nice, like Patrick Swayze says in Roadhouse. And until it's time not to be nice, but try not to send the hate mail. But if you send the hate mail, that's how you feel. And you just need to get it down on a piece of paper. We'll read it. I'm not going to tell you that we'll respond to it, but we'll read it.
Now, are they going to take a picture of that piece of paper and then email it to us?
Whatever. Tosh.
I do have to thank the listener who sent in a whole list of movies that they would like to see us review recently here. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
we really appreciate that.
Yeah, we had a couple of listeners who have done that so far. And, you know, like...
written some nice reviews, too.
Yeah, like, exactly. It's awesome. So like we say, here's the thing. We're doing one movie every week or 2 weeks, 2 weeks sort of.
Trying for 2 weeks.
So our list is probably about 500 movies long right now. So we're trying to get to it. I cannot tell you when that will be, although we're just working through the list. And sometimes there are movies that come up that weren't even on the list. And I'm like, but it's not on the list. And that's my type of personality. But Parry's like, but it's so fun. We should do it anyway. And then we start thinking of things like birthday movies that weren't originally on the list, and all sorts of craziness starts to happen. So we are trying to cover all the crazy movies. But know that we are listening and we are taking whatever you give us and we're putting it into that master list of movies. So know that it is still in there. But yeah, like I said, please rate, review, subscribe to our podcast. Thank you so much for listening to us ramble on and today to me geeking out about my birthplace. And I hope you learned something different about Jamaica that you didn't know before, because I know I did. And that was crazy in and of itself. Anything else? Or are you good?
I think
it's time for you to eat. So remember,
be kind.
Rewind. Bye.
Bye.
Oh no! Here's where you asked me some fucking inane question.
No, I just wanted to close on a great Groucho Marx quote, which is,
But we closed. So here's the thing that I don't understand. When I say rewind, for me, that's a closure. That we're done. That's the signal. And then you always come up with these little after things afterwards.
Because they sound good as the music's playing.
Okay, go.
So, Groucho Marx once said, "Did you ever realize Peter O'Toole is a double-phallic name?"
That's actually a good one today. I don't hate you for that one. You're ridiculous.
Yep.
Today we got something special. Breakfast jump up.
And what is breakfast jump up?
Well, it's when you jump up and make your own breakfast.